Welcome to the Magic Lighthouse Podcast. For those of us who are aware that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, the Magic Lighthouse is your mystical pit stop, your spiritual tune-up, your place to pause, reflect, and realign with the next phase of our journey. Join me, Violet Koncz, on this adventure to harmonize and amplify the light within ourselves and each other as we raise the consciousness of the planet, one conversation at a time. Thank you for being here and sharing your light with us. Enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Magic Lighthouse Podcast. And today I'm super excited to have Evelyn Kennedy on with us. Welcome, Evelyn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Violet.
Yay, I'm so excited. So to jump into who she is, Evelyn is an intuitive educator, medium, and channel from the Pacific Northwest. She teaches courses on topics like self-reflection, quote-unquote, the mirror grid, we'll get into that later, self-love, ethical manifestation, queerness in the metaphysical, psychic development, and raising your intuitive child. She's written 2 children's books on energy tools and spirituality. She loves working with people that are ready to commit to their growth journey. So yeah, super impressive. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation. And before we dive into the conversation itself, I like to take a minute to just ground and to do a little meditation together, synchronize our energies.
Excellent.
Give the audience a chance to take a breath. So yeah, let's do it. Wherever you are, close your eyes if it's safe. If you're driving, just stay focused. Maybe turn this part down for a minute. Close your eyes, get comfortable. Take a deep breath in. Hold it at the top. And let that breath out with a sigh. Take another deep breath in. Hold it at the top again. And then let that breath out with another sigh. Let's take a third deep breath in and hold it at the top a little bit longer. And then when you can't hold that breath anymore, you can let it out. Let us give thanks for this conversation that we're about to have. Let us give thanks for all the support beings that collaborated for us to be here together. Let us give thanks to all our ancestors, the ancestors of the land that we're on. I don't know if you can hear my baby screaming in the background or not screaming, but yelling. Let's give thanks to all our family and friends and our, everybody in our lives. And let us close out this little meditative moment with another deep breath to anchor in all that gratitude. And let that breath out. When you're ready, open your eyes and come back into the space. Yay! How'd you do?
Great. I think that I am very good at my opening meditation. I think it's going good so far.
Yeah, you did great. Yay. Well, there's so much that I want to talk about with you. And first of all, I found you randomly. You came up on my For You kind of thing on TikTok. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Oh, okay. Psychic, talking to your kids about being psychic or talking to your kids about their past lives. I think that's super fascinating. And I can't wait to talk to my son about all that when he gets older, when he can talk. So how did you get started in all of this? What's your story? I know that might be a big question, but
I know, right? Well, I was born.
Right.
So, um, but seriously, like this is the kind of work that I feel like has been lifelong for me. The invitation to this work has always existed. It's just been a matter of how prevalent I've allowed it to be in my life. And now it's to the point where it's something that I dedicate myself really wholly to, in that it's my career path, but also my personal path. And so when I first started, I guess let's go back to the beginning. When I first started dealing with this, I was a little kid and I was clairvoyant, but I didn't know that that's what was happening.
And
And so I was just,
clairvoyant is, sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Clairvoyant is where you can see things.
yes, yes. So clairvoyance is an act of clear seeing. And so what that meant for me was that I could see dead people. I could see
Fun.
energetics and entities around me. Um, and it was spooky because I was pretty little. Like I was like 5, 6, 7 when I have like memories of this, but I assume that it was happening before that and I just don't have memories of it. Um, and eventually I got so scared that I just shut it entirely down. Like I don't remember consciously shutting it down. I just know that I was so afraid and I was like, I want this to stop. I'm done with this. And no one had like the context. I didn't really talk to anyone about it. And if I did, I was just like, oh, I just had a bad dream. Like I'm scared. But I didn't really disclose, like, I can see these things. And anytime I like hinted at it, like people were just like, oh, you have an active imagination. You had a bad dream or whatever. And I just kind of like rolled with that. And now knowing what I know, I'm like, that's not what was going on. Like I know when I'm having a bad dream. And that's not what was happening. Um, so I shut down all of that. And then later I started to kind of unpack that in my teen years. I started experimenting with like lucid dreaming. I had a psychic reading, I think, when I was like 14 years old, that my mom took me to this massage therapist who was also an energy worker. And she was like, oh, you're like gonna do energy work as your job. And I was like, I was like 14. So I was like, yeah, like maybe, probably, I don't know. I just didn't like pay much thought to it. And then I did hair for the first 12 years of my adult life. Um, and I had started my real journey into spirit work when my daughter was born, and when I was pregnant with her. Actually was one of my really first times of really pushing myself. I had, when I was pregnant, they showed on an ultrasound that I had, they didn't want to call it a placenta previa because they weren't really sure what it was, but they were like, there's something over your cervix. Like there's something in your uterus blocking the passageway. It's like partially blocking it. It doesn't really look like the placenta. It looks like maybe it might be some other like vein system, something. They really didn't know. And I was like, oh man, like I was planning on having a home birth. That would like mean I was gonna have to have a C-section. Um, and so that was the first time that I really like went into myself and started like using energy healing on myself and like visualizing my body and like moving my energy through it and like making real shifts in my body. And I went back for an ultrasound 4 weeks later and it was fine. So I was like, that was cool. But I kind of was still like, whatever.
It was a coincidence, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. Could this
Yeah. I
actually
didn't, I
happen?
didn't, yeah, I didn't take it seriously for sure. And then when my daughter was born, that was like the catalyst moment in my life that was like, you are going to face everything that you've been avoiding facing up until this time. You're going to have to step into your power. You're going to have to like, undergo all of these major lessons that you've put off. It's going to be a messy disaster. And so that's kind of what it was. But ultimately, it was this huge invitation. And the birth of my daughter was when I really started to integrate my lessons that I was learning spiritually and then like taking them into like my human life, my physical existence. Um, and then a little bit after that, I started training, like actually like with a program to like learn to hone these skills. And that's when I received the download and channeled all of the information on the Mirror Grid, which is my course that I teach. And it's all about self-reflection based on Metatron's cube. And so, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's been a wild, it's been a wild ride that I feel like has dabbled in a little bit of everything. And now I feel like I'm finally in an aligned place, like doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what an epic journey. Thank you for answering the call and just like diving into, you know, this, I don't know if it's I mean, profession, but it really lifestyle and just way of being a human.
Right. Well, and it's one of those things too where like I think a lot of people do kind of see it as like a job. Like I think that I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a disconnect, I think, between like doing the spiritual work and then actually implementing the spiritual work in your regular daily existence. There's a lot of people I think that have a hard time like taking like the spiritual messages and then bringing them into their life and like living the path instead of just like, oh yeah, I have these profound spiritual awakenings and understandings and knowledge of how the universe works, and then my waking life is crap because I don't apply any of those lessons. You know. So I like to work with people who are ready to make those shifts, I guess, ready to sort of like get the information and use the information.
Mm-hmm. So is that with the mirror grid course that you teach?
Yeah, that's one of the ways for sure. The mirror grid, the concept of it is that it's a Metatron's cube, which is a sacred geometry shape that contains all of the other platonic solids. It's one of those shapes that it includes the flower of life. It has so much profound messaging and meaning, and the mirror grid is just sort of one application of a Metatron's cube. But for me, what it really meant was I've in 2018, I channeled Metatron and they downloaded this information for me of how to use this grid for self-reflection. And so I took the Metatron's cube. First off, what was cool is that I had received guidance that I was supposed to draw during a meditation, to help me like get information more clearly. And this is like when I was training. So I did, and I ended up drawing a Metatron's cube, but I didn't know what a Metatron's cube was. Like that's not something that was in my repertoire. I didn't know. And so I brought it into my class and I was like, I drew this, but I don't know if, does anyone have any insight? Like, what do you get from it? And my teacher was like, that's a Metatron's cube. And I was like, whoa, okay. That's weird. Yeah. Like I drew a thing that you can Google. Okay. So I Googled it. I was like, yep, that's definitely that. And I had put all these words in it. So each circle has a word in it, and the words are like gratitude, language, trust, vulnerability, care, change in action, all of these kinds of attributes. And so through my work with this grid, I was able to figure out how to use the Metatron's cube as a map of your own strengths and weaknesses. So basically, you go through, you identify all of these areas in your grid, you identify what's a strength and what's a weakness. So that's why it's a self-reflection method, is because you have to get really curious with yourself, and challenge yourself a lot. And a lot of times something you think is a strength is actually a weakness, and something you think is a weakness is actually a strength. And so then from there, once you sort of start making these assessments, you're able to look at the patterns and the areas of imbalance and find a pathway that makes the most sense for you as an individual to use your areas of known strength to support your areas of weakness. And so what this is important for is empowerment and just showing people the level of involvement that they really get to have in their lives, because it's so common, I think, for people to not want to take ownership, or like to be like, I can't, or like, here's all my limitations, or like, I'm not good at this, or like, I have trust issues, or whatever. And to identify what they have, but then never do anything about it. And so the mirror grid shows that like, just because you have a deficit in one area, which everyone does, like no one has 100% strengths. And especially not when you start applying different contexts. Like I could have a really strong vulnerability sphere, but then be put in a situation where I'm interacting with like some authority figure that I don't vibe with. And maybe I have terrible vulnerability. So it just depends. Everything's always sort of shifting, but it's all about the relationships between those strengths and those weaknesses, and showing that just because something doesn't come naturally to you doesn't mean that you can't support it. And the way that you support it is with tools that you already have. So it's just kind of teaching people how to navigate their own minds to find a pathway to success through tools they already have, not even through developing new tools, just through being like, okay, I can't do this way, but what way does work for me?
Yeah, it's like I have all these tools. Like there's a hammer, there's a screwdriver, I have a nail. Which one do I use? I don't know. So you come in and you're
Right.
like, you pick that one. I don't remember what I
Right,
said,
right.
but
Well,
pick
and
that
even
one.
like and even like to further that analogy, if you have a nail and you have neither a hammer or a screwdriver, like then what?
Mm-hmm.
Then do you have a different way to make the join? Do you have any glue? Do you have like, what's the
The
system?
back of a shoe, maybe.
Exactly. Like you got to get creative because you do have things. It's really just like one big problem solving exercise that I think is really great. And it leads to such profound personal growth because it makes people think, it makes people be in their thoughts instead of in their reactions. Like they have to
Mm-hmm.
take enough of a moment to be like, what's the whole picture? What am I working with? Is there anything I'm missing? It just gives this breath, this pause for people to then move forward with. And I know that it's for me, like even in working with my own grid, I had my language is one of the spheres, and I had my language sphere that was a strength. And the more that I started working with it, I started comparing it to different situations. Like, this is my grid, but this is my grid at work. This is my grid, but this is my grid in romantic partnerships. This is my grid, but this is my grid in family. And um, I realized that my language sphere was like only strong when I was alone. Like, that I had good language, like with myself, but I didn't actually use my language as a strength externally. I had a lot of like throat chakra blocks.
Mm.
I wasn't able to like communicate clearly with people, or I would think that I was communicating clearly with people, but people were frequently receiving me in a way I didn't intend them to. And I had to be like, this is not a strength. I really thought that this was a strength of mine, and it's not. And if it is a strength, it's not operating as a strength. So I had to look at the rest of my grid and be like, how am I going to support this? What other strengths do I have that I can pull from, that I can pull knowledge and energy from those areas and apply them into my ability to converse, and have clear language and to be understood and to be interpreted. Um, and and I ended up pulling it from a bunch of places. I pulled it from gratitude. I pulled it from trust. Um, and that obviously those kinds of things like that will mean something different to every person who's working with it. But um, it's really fun, and it's really fun to see my students go through that process too, of being like, oh man, I thought that my care circle was a strength, and it's not, or it's a strength, but it's so overpowered that it's depleting me in these other areas. And I mean, it's just a cool, like really linear map, I guess, for people to get curious with themselves.
Wow, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Very cool. So what's something that your students have accomplished out of this course in their lives?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I notice is that people don't stagnate. Like once they have the foundation of the mirror grid, I find that they're able to, first off, you can apply it to tons of situations, right? Um, but I find that it keeps them on a forward trajectory. So instead of sitting in like, oh man, I made a mistake or I had a point of failure, they're able to be like, oh, okay, what's my next approach? So they don't sit in like the victim place or the I don't have the tools or I'm not good enough. It's like it's okay to sit in that and like take a beat for that and to like take a moment to be in your feelings. But overall, like you don't want to live there, you want to keep going, you want to keep growing. And so that's really the biggest thing that I see, is that it keeps people on a forward and up trajectory.
That's good. That's really
Yeah.
important.
Oh,
Very.
absolutely.
What do you think is the most important thing to keep in mind when you're on a journey of self-discovery and moving forward and expanding?
That's a great question. I think that the most important thing to keep in mind is that everyone is on that journey, because I think sometimes you can
Mhm.
feel really lonely.
Yeah.
Um, and you can feel like either you're outgrowing people, you're transcending people. You can feel really bitter and angry if other people are at a different place in their growth journey than you are. You start expecting everyone to be where you're at. That can build a lot of anger and resentment. And so I really think that like it's really helpful to remain grounded in the fact that like we're all kind of doing the same thing, even if we're doing it in a different way, and even if um, we're in an earlier part of our growth journey. And one way that I think it's really important to do that is by looking back at where you've come from and taking time to like honor and hold gratitude and love for every version of yourself that you've been operating with the skill set that you had at the time. And it helps you then apply that outwards also. So when you see people in a different growth journey, you don't feel like you need to recruit them. You don't feel like you need to fix them. You don't feel like you need to motivate them. You're just able to be like, they're on their path then, and celebrate them where they're at on their path, is which is I think really great. And I think that's how we can really help raise like the collective vibration and the collective consciousness and keep everyone forward moving, is not by shaming people for where they're at, but rather celebrating how far they've come, and then they naturally continue to grow from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, talking about, oh, yes. So, everybody's on their own path. You mentioned that in their life. And then everyone's soul is in their own path and on their own journey. So, someone might not get to where you are in their lifetime, but they will in their soul's lifetime, right?
Right. Right.
So, it's just, yeah, it's good to keep that in mind and to just not compare yourself to other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've gotten actually a lot of questions in my DMs lately about that sort of idea, specifically with regards to like suicide of all things, but people
Interesting.
asking like, if someone kills themselves, basically like they're like, do they get punished, do they like, then what happens, do they have to go
Mm-hmm.
back and start over? And I usually just explain to people that like, we are all forward moving, growing. No one has to like regress,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't get to skip ahead either. And so if you think that like, that
Dang it.
like, I know, right? Yeah, so suicide doesn't necessarily mean you fast forward to the end of your growth journey in this life and that you get to
Yeah.
come back a little bit leveled up. It's like you just are always moving forward, no matter what plane you're in, you're one foot in front of the other. And sometimes it might feel like you're taking steps backwards, and one step forward at a time doesn't necessarily mean that like you're never going to face hardship, or that you're never going to or that you're going to get it right every time. Even it just means that like you're doing the work, you're making the progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when you take like a step forward and a step back, you're doing the cha cha. So you're just dancing,
Yeah,
dancing with life.
exactly. And there's its own beautiful message.
Exactly. Just dance with life, you guys. It's all gonna be okay. So let's talk a little bit about social media and your
Yeah.
Instagram and TikTok. And for those of you who don't know, Evelyn's TikTok is the period mirror period grid, and same as Instagram. So
Yes,
yeah, let's talk
yes.
about that, girl. Like you said, you have what,
Yeah.
65,000 followers on TikTok.
I
What are
actually
your
have like
secrets?
I have 72,000 now.
Oh
But
dang! Yes.
so this is a really funny thing where I like my superpower is manifesting. I can manifest whatever I want whenever I want. Like in human design, I'm a manifester,
Nice.
and it is very true. And sometimes it's true in ways that like kind of honestly freak me out. Um, so I was like in the car with my partner, and she was like, um, saying something like, I was like, I know I need to grow my business. I was kind of trying, I was like in the early like birthing stages of my business. And she's like, well, you really need to like build a community. And I was like, I don't want to build a community. I was like, I don't have energy for that. I don't want to do that. That's too much work. I was like, there's got to be another way. And she was like, okay, well, that's how people do it. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do it that way. I was like, I wish. Then I said it like out loud. I was like, I want, I just want like I just want the following. I was like, I just want to be able to talk and have people hear my message and like what I'm learning and what I'm sharing. And she was kind of like, okay. And I was like, and I just want it to be like effortless. And this is like it's been like 4 months, and now I went from like I
No
had like
way.
zero, like we're
I think
like zero.
I found you when you were like still maybe a couple thousand. Like you hadn't blown up, and yeah, I can't believe it's only been
Yeah,
4 months.
it's so funny though. And she just still laughs at me. Like she's like, how many TikTok followers do you have? And I'm like, I don't know, like 50,000. And she's like, remember that time that you said that you just wanted like this following, you wanted it to come to you really easily? Because before that, I was like trying to do things on Instagram. I was like, I found myself very much comparing my business growth journey to other similar styles of practitioners. Like I was
Yeah.
like, this is what they did, this is what they had to do, it took them this long. And I was really limiting myself by trying to make myself operate by the way that I had seen other people operate. And I knew it wasn't right for me. That's why I was like, I don't want to do it this way. So it's been really fun to fall into the journey of like, it's going the way that is aligned for me. Even with like the things that have blown up for me on TikTok have helped like shape what I'm doing basically, because I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm really going to focus on people that are in some sort of life transition. I want to do like life coaching. I knew I wanted to teach, but I didn't know exactly what all I wanted to teach about. And I wasn't going to talk about kids. Like that wasn't my thing. Um, I have kids. I've been an intuitive kid. I'm raising an intuitive kid, two of them. And
Mm-hmm.
I just, it wasn't going to be my thing. I was like, I knew a lot of people who did that. And I was like, I didn't want to step on their toes. So it's just like, oh, this isn't for me. I work with grownups. But then as soon as I started talking about my daughter's past lives or kids' past lives and past life remembrances or intuitive children in general, as soon as I started talking about that, I blew up. And
Mm.
every single time that like then I'll try like on TikTok, I'll try to like talk about something else and they don't do as well. And then I talk about my kid's past life and it's like 20,000 followers, you know? So I'm like, this is what people want to hear. Like this is
Yeah.
what people want from me. And so I really had to like be like, oh, this is aligned. So this is the direction that we're going. Like alignment, it'll unfold easy, and that's what it's doing. And so that's what led me to write my books too. I mean, having my daughter led me to write my first book, especially. Um, but it's been fun to see like how it goes. And now I teach a raising your intuitive child class, and you know, it's just so fun to see that progression happen and like
That's
the
so
surprising
cool.
ways it takes place.
Yes. That's so cool. Can you show us your books? Do you have them available and
Yeah,
share the
totally.
title?
Yeah, so this one is Isabel Brave. And Isabel Brave, I wrote, just like as I shared earlier, my experience as a young kid being psychic and being sort of dismissed. I wrote really for kids like that, kids who were scared and kids who needed tools and verbiage.
Mm.
Um, and for my daughter as well, who had very scary and intense past life remembrances when she was about 2 to 3. And I was just like, man, like there's more kids like this out here that need this. Um,
Definitely.
so this is Isabel, and one thing that's cool about this book is that I did use there's no gender assumptions in this book, so I don't gender my main characters, I don't gender their family. I don't make any assumptions about the familial structure. That was important to me too, because like when I got divorced, I was married to a man, and I just started being really acutely aware of like how hard it is to find kids books that you can really like see a lot of different kinds of families in. And so whether that's like kids that are raised by their grandparents or kids that are raised by like single dads or kids that have two moms or whatever, I didn't want everything to be represented the way that we always see it. So I left everything really open-ended, and that was sort of an important component of the book for me. But even in this part, this was my little shout out to like my inner child here. It says they'll say I just have nightmares or an active imagination, whatever that means. And so that was my call out to my former self. And through this story, Isabel finds themselves needing to build an energetic bubble. And so it just walks kids through the process of clearing their energy field, building a bubble of protection, calling in guides to assist them. And it talks about how your guides can be a stuffed animal, your guides can be a loved one, your guides can be anyone. Again, very open-ended in case anyone has like religious preferences.
I love it.
And so, yeah, I had a really good time writing this book. And it's also written in open dyslexic font because my daughter is dyslexic and I just wanted it to be as accessible as possible for her.
Yeah.
And then my second book, this one just came out, so I'm really excited to share this with you guys. And you can get both of these at themirrorgrid.com. And you can get Isabel Brave actually on Amazon also, but I have not yet released Away on Stars on Amazon. But this one took me much longer to make because the art style is all collage. And so I had to make many collages with many tiny pieces of paper.
Beautiful.
So it took a very long time, but it is all about this soul family that connects again and again through time and space. And so it really connects to the feeling of like parental love, the bittersweetness of like raising kids and kids coming and going. And this really came from actually my experience with infertility and with child loss that happened in my family when I was a teenager. So I wrote it just based on my understanding of what it means to have a soul connection and how that connection persists regardless of what realm we're in, and how really just beautiful it is that like we really do find and reconnect with each other over and over again through our past lives, on our current and future timelines, and just how impactful it is to understand what it's like to interact with spirit babies. And all of this is very like, the book itself doesn't really go into like, this is what a spirit baby is, or like, this is what a soul connection is. It's just the story of the connection. But you can really feel all of that sort of underlying meaning in it, which I think is really, really beautiful. And I was excited to share that one too.
Yay, it's so beautiful. I'm so excited to get my hands on both of those books and read them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have them in a package too on my website, so they're a little bit cheaper when you buy both of them. And when you buy them directly from my website, I do sign all of the copies. So that's just a little bonus that you get for supporting the artist directly.
Beautiful. I love it. And you're also leaving a little energy of your own there for the person.
Absolutely.
It's not just printed. That's awesome.
It's been so cool too. Like, I mean, if you would have told me that I was going to write a kid's book, well, first off, I guess I'd probably been like, I don't know, that maybe sounds like something I would do, but not something that I was like particularly passionate about. And then it just happened. And it was like, again, it was aligned. I was ready to do it. I knew what I wanted to say. I just like, sort of downloaded all the information into my brain and put it out into the world. And it's been so cool to see like when I get on my website and I'm like looking at all the different places that I've shipped books to, and not even just that, like, I can't even see the data for like where Amazon is shipping books to. All I know is like where I'm like sitting here and like printing labels and being like, oh my gosh, like my story is going to all of these kids who are going to need it and who are going to benefit from it and who are going to have a chance to have a different experience. And maybe they won't shut down all of their, gifts, and maybe they'll feel more held and more seen in that. And so it just feels like such a gift. And I am so grateful to be able to just share that out into the world.
Yeah, it's so nice. I have a relative who, when she was a kid, she saw some things, some this like witchy, not witchy, but I don't know, like this. She would draw it for us, and it was kind of scary. And yeah, if only we had these tools, if only I had this book to give her, or if her mom had this book to give her, maybe it would have helped. I think it would have. I mean, but generally her family is very supportive anyway. It's just, the kids grow up, and we all, I think, are connected to spirit and to our intuition. So it's really important to have this kind of resource for sure.
Yeah. And well, and I love too, like I've had a couple clients and students that have bought Isabel Brave to do their own inner child work, to like
Oh, that's
read and
smart.
speak to that. Yeah, to speak to that version of themselves that wasn't maybe seen, or that didn't have an understanding of what was going on. And I think that's really beautiful too. Oh, there's a guided meditation in the back of Isabel Brave, and if you go on my website, that is free to download. Um, so you guys can check that out too. It's really good for like if you have an anxious kid around sleep time. Um, it can just sort of help like get into the flow of like, we're building a bubble. What's your bubble look like? Do we need any helpers or friends or protectors? Um, and so I think it just really helps with that security piece.
Oh, that's really sweet. Very nice. Very nice. I'm excited to try it. So what is something that regarding like past lives or psychic kids, what is something that we can watch out for as parents to see, okay, are our kids having these experiences? And if they are, how do I see it and how do I support them?
Sure. So one thing that I usually see is a lot of times parents will feel really threatened if their kid is sharing a past life memory. Because oftentimes when they are, they will describe it as their mother from before, um, their family that they're missing. So the kid is really sitting in grief and in loss, that they aren't with these people that they remember, and that they know are important to them. And so the most common thing that I see is that parents try to convince their kid, well, I'm your mom now, and that like they get intimidated by the idea of their kid having this love for a parent that isn't them, and a parent that probably doesn't exist in this world anymore. And so I would just really encourage you, if your kid is sharing what seems like past life memories, rather than trying to um, force them into integrating into this current experience, they just need to be seen and held in their grief. So they will integrate into this life. That's what happens as time goes on. They're in this world longer, they're with you longer. And eventually, for the most part, those past life memories do fade. Not in every instance, some people do retain them forever, um, but usually they fade. And so rather than feeling like your kid doesn't love you because they're asking for this other mom or their other dad, um, just trying to remember that what matters is that your kid is sad and feeling loneliness, and so holding them in that. And so usually the verbiage that I would recommend in that case is just, you're so sad, and that is so sad. You miss them so much, and I love you so much, and I'm so glad that you're here, but I hear how much you miss them, and they sound like they were so special to you. And so holding them in that, and just knowing that like it doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean even that they don't want to be here. It just means that like they're sad. So showing up for them that way, I think, is really important. Um, and then I guess the other thing is just, on the flip side, not trying to necessarily dig up past life remembrance. Like if it's something that happens, that's great, but like the goal is you do want to be integrated fully into your current existence. And so if your kid doesn't have a past life memory that they bring to the table, you don't necessarily need to like probe. Um, Sometimes you can ask without necessarily like implying that they should remember something. Um, I'll sometimes just ask like an open-ended question, like, do you remember where you came from? And uh, that is always just interesting because both of my kids have shared like memories of being in the womb. And my son says, yeah, there was lots of juice.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, yeah, there was a lot of juice. Um, So something like that. Or even if you're interested in getting your kids' perspective on what their understanding is, asking questions like what their soul, what they think their soul looks like. That can be a really cool insight also, without necessarily feeling like you're digging up potentially like a traumatic past life or something that maybe they need to access it, maybe they don't need to access it until they're older, but um just sort of giving them a lot of space to have their own experience and to be on their own path. And like your role as a parent is the support person. Like you are there to facilitate and give tools, but really just remember that like they're on their path.
Yeah, that's so cool. Wow, very, very good tips, very good suggestions. Don't probe, don't try to dig up past life stuff. Just like be there for them, be a space holder for them. It's all so beautiful.
Well, and like with my daughter, she was 2.5 when she started crying, missing her mom and her sister from before, her mom and her sister and her grandma from before. And I mean, it kind of to me seemed like it was out of the blue. And she just one day, after she sort of learned how to talk, she would just stay up and cry and cry and cry and cry for what felt like forever, for a few months, just saying how much she missed them, and this is what her grandma before did, and this is what she was like, and this is what her sister was like, and this is the toys her sister had, and she really wishes that she still had that toy to remember her sister by, and just really a lot of intense sadness. And so when she was going through all of that, it was just like so obvious to me that what mattered is that I had a sad kid in front of me. And so I didn't need to get her to forget, and I didn't need to necessarily dig up more, especially because she started sharing about how she died and how like she fell in the water and it was like an icy lake and she didn't know the word for ice. So she said it was like slippery and shiny and hard water. And she described her grandma trying to get her out of the ice, and just, I mean, it was devastating. And so I just think that like, if you're sitting in a situation where your kid maybe had a traumatic death in their past life, like we don't necessarily want to like re-traumatize them. They're already carrying that wounding in them, if they didn't fully process it in their like post-life experience. And so we just have to be mindful, like, maybe it's not in their best interest to remember all of those things.
Yeah, definitely. Where do all these where do these things where do these things store in our systems? Do you know?
Yeah. So everyone is kind of different that I've noticed. Some people don't bring any of that. First off, like some people, it's like they die, they in their post-life process, they filter everything out, they sort of integrate their lessons before they come in. My daughter seemed like she didn't, like she was surprised to incarnate as quickly as she did, I think. And maybe it wasn't necessarily fast, but it was like more sudden than she thought it was going to be, because she was like mad. Like she was the maddest baby. She hated being a baby. And she's still, I mean, she's 7 years old and she's like, acts like a 40-year-old. Like she was a grown-up trapped in suddenly in this baby body, and she hated it. So she was miserable. And for her, I think hers was a little bit more of a fluke. Like the information that came with her wasn't processed. And so she's like gonna probably be processing that through her current incarnation. And now she doesn't remember it at all. So she'll be processing it in whatever way it looks like for her. So sometimes people store it in their bodies. Sometimes you can have like a body trigger. Like just something where like, oh, whoops, that's where all my wounding is. I know that I have a whole bunch of like generational familial grief that's stored in my hips, and if my partner like rubs or squeezes my hips, it makes me cry every time. So you can store things in your body. You can store things just in your soul signature. If you have a really strong ability to possess like claircognizance, which is like clear knowing, you can just have a knowing that you have this information. So there's lots of ways to access your past lives if that's something that you or your listeners are interested in. And I do have a guided meditation recording on my site for that. And it's short. It's like 5 minutes. You can use it as many times as you want. You can go back to as many places as you want that are relevant to whatever you're working on. And so you can go on, do a guided meditation, and retrieve that information for yourself. And it just depends. You can get the information kind of wherever, depending on who you are and what the situation was.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, speaking of your website, so is the website the best place for people to find you, or website and social?
Totally. So the website is definitely like if you're really interested in working with me, that's where you should go. I have my mailing list on there. I send out usually once a month. I send out like, hey, this is what's new. These are the classes that are coming up. If my availability for energy reading or coaching sessions has changed, that information will be there. And then a lot of my free content, content that I would say is more like meaty, more like if you're ready to do the work, go to my website. And if you are just interested in learning more, like the social media is probably best. Because like on TikTok, we can share 60 seconds of anything, but 60 seconds is 60 seconds. And so the form factor is a lot more limiting in terms of how much of the meat we can really get into. So yeah, definitely check out my website, themirrorgrid.com, if you're wanting to do a little bit more of the juicy work.
Yes, yes. And to buy your children's books.
Yes, check those out there for sure.
Yes. And I want to get those as gifts and for like Mother's Day and Father's
Yes.
Day. And
Away in Stars, I pushed myself really hard to make sure that it came out by Mother's Day or before Mother's Day so that it would be available for Mother's Day because of my journey with infertility. Mother's Day was sensitive for me, and this book I really wrote speaking to a childless version of myself, which I think was really useful. So if you do know anyone that's struggling with infertility, this is written with that in mind, and it does speak to babies that come and go and the feeling of that, retaining that soul connection with them.
beautiful, beautiful. So before we go, is there anything else you want to leave us with?
Oh gosh.
I know
Now the
there's so
pressure's
much.
really on, right? Like, let me just hang on. Let me see if I can impart all of my wisdom in 60 seconds. Probably
Distill
not.
it down. I know, man.
Yeah.
We need to come back. We need to have a series or something.
Yeah, that'd be super fun. Basically just stay tuned on all my stuff. I'm always putting out new information, and as I come into my own understandings of like what my missions are and what information I want to bring out, there's always more coming up. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on though and giving me a chance to share some of my work.
Yes, of course. I appreciate you being on here and sharing your wisdom and your magic. And I also wanted to throw in, you mentioned a little promo for the audience. Is that something you still
Yes, absolutely. So I think will you put that all in the show notes and stuff?
Yes,
It's a and it's
absolutely.
a discount code. So I don't even remember what I said it was.
Oh, you said that I should choose one. So let's have it be the Magic Lighthouse.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. I'll set it up. The Magic Lighthouse, and that'll give you a discount on anything on my website.
Awesome. That is amazing. I'm very generous of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Violet.
For more guided meditations, soulful conversations, and conscious content launched weekly, please follow the Magic Lighthouse wherever you listen to podcasts.